This all started with a missing persons report. A young woman vanished without a trace. Her brother was desperate to find her. But when police followed her online trail, they uncovered something far more disturbing. 9 bodies all hidden in a small apartment. And at the center of it all, a man who had been quietly hunting his victims through social media. This is the chilling story of Takahiro Shiraishi, the Twitter killer. Takahiro Shiraishi seemed like an ordinary man. Born on October 9, 1990, in Zama City, Japan, he grew up in a relatively quiet household. His parents and teachers described him as a shy child, someone who rarely stood out. Unlike most children, Shiraishi didn't display any aggressive tendencies or cause trouble. He went through school without much notice, blending into the background, invisible to most people. However, underneath this seemingly calm exterior, dark thoughts began to fester. As he grew older, Shiraishi became increasingly isolated. He struggled to form close friendships, and his relationship with his family grew distant. By the time he finished high school, Shiraishi felt directionless. Unlike his peers, who moved on to universities or stable jobs, Shiraishi jumped between part-time positions, trying and failing to find a place in the world. He eventually found work in the sex industry, recruiting young women to work in escort services. This line of work introduced him to the more exploitative and manipulative side of human nature, further deepening his growing disconnection from society. Shiraishi's role as a recruiter exposed him to vulnerable individuals, people on the margins of society, struggling with poverty, abuse, and mental health issues. It was here that Shiraishi began to fully realize the power he could hold over others. Manipulation came easily to him, and he quickly learned how to exploit those who were desperate and lost. This realization would later shape his approach to finding victims online. Despite his work in the sex industry, Shiraishi remained an outsider. His loneliness deepened, and the fantasies he harbored in secret began to grow darker. He confessed in later interviews that he felt no real connection to anyone around him. He was simply going through the motions of life. By the age of 27, he was unemployed, isolated, and adrift in a world that seemed to have no place for him. His frustration grew, and with it, his urge to exert control over others. What made Shiraishi even more dangerous was his ability to hide these dark thoughts from those around him. To his neighbors, he was quiet, polite, and unremarkable. No one could have suspected that behind his calm demeanor, Shiraishi was preparing for something horrific. In fact, it wasn't until 2017 that anyone outside his immediate circle even knew his name. But when his crimes came to light, they would shock the world, revealing the hidden monster within a man no one would have suspected. His story, like so many other serial killers before him, was one of hidden darkness. A man who seemed ordinary, but was anything but. Takahiro Shiraishi's seemingly normal life was nothing more than a mask, concealing the twisted fantasies that were growing stronger by the day. Takahiro Shiraishi found his victims through Twitter, a platform where many people express their thoughts and feelings. He specifically searched for people who were struggling with thoughts of suicide, people who felt lost, alone, and were looking for an escape from their pain. Shiraishi would reply to these vulnerable individuals, pretending to understand their suffering. He promised them a way out, claiming that he could help them end their lives peacefully and painlessly, but his real intentions were far more sinister. These people, believing that Shiraishi was someone who cared, agreed to meet him in person. He would invite them to his small apartment in Zama City, about an hour from Tokyo, where he promised them comfort and relief from their suffering. But once they stepped inside, they were walking into a deadly trap. Instead of helping them, Shiraishi murdered them, dismembered their bodies, and stored the remains in his apartment. When police finally arrived at his door, they found a scene so horrifying it shook even the most experienced detectives. All these murders occurred between August and October 2017. Shiraishi carefully selected his victims during this short but terrifying time. Shiraishi claimed the lives of 9 people, 8 women and 1 man. Most of them were in their teens or early 20s. These were people who had turned to social media in a moment of weakness, hoping to find someone who understood them. Instead, they met with unimaginable horror. It wasn't until October 30th, when the brother of one of the victims reported her missing, that police traced her last known messages back to Shiraishi's Twitter account. The brutality of his actions shocked not only Japan, but the world. Shiraishi's method was as cruel as it was calculating. He reached out to vulnerable people online, offering them what they believed would be an end to their suffering. But instead, they walked into a trap. Shiraishi strangled his victims and then dismembered their bodies to hide the evidence. He later confessed to the murders, showing no remorse. So question is, why did Takahiro Shiraishi commit these terrible crimes? According to his own confession, he killed for his own twisted desires. He said he was drawn to his victims' pain and wanted to take advantage of their vulnerability. Experts suggest that Shiraishi's actions reflect deep psychological problems, including a lack of empathy and a desire for control. In December 2020, Takahiro Shiraishi was sentenced to death for his crimes. His case left Japan grappling with the dangers of social media, mental health, and the terrifying reality of predators lurking online. Though he is now behind bars, the memory of his victims remains a painful reminder of the evil that can hide behind a friendly face. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. Stay tuned.